behavior is, and they're going to twist our arms until we obey them, and that's got to stop. But the reason I think gay marriage is such an interesting example of where I would take a party after this election, one way or another, I would go, in fact, to the common sense resistance idea. And the reason I bring up gay marriage is simply this. If you look at the history of it, you're really looking at the history of state licensing marriage. States, if I was campaigning on this issue, I would say, listen, I've said this many times in real time, but here's how it would go if it means what would happen to the party afterward. This would be my new Conservative Party's position on gay marriage. I would say, well, look, I've looked at this pocket constitution of mine, and the gay marriage is not anywhere in here. Not anywhere. And you know what's interesting? Straight marriage isn't in here at all either. It's not covered by the federal government. It has absolutely no business doing anything like this. This is our argument entirely. This is our consistent, compelling argument that the government is involved in things it has no business being involved in whatsoever. So this is my position, and presumably the position of the new Conservative Party of the Common Sense Resistance, or whatever you want to call it. Our position is this. Look, Constitution doesn't say anything about marriage, gay or straight. We find out if we read our history that the reason that you need a marriage license in the first place, and the reason that a government can bar marriages, prevent people from being married, is because after the Civil War, the Democrats, as usual in the South, erected these barriers to prevent white people from marrying black people. They basically said, well, if you're gonna, we can't really stop this, what was the word they used, concatenation or something, but we can say that you're not allowed to get married until you have a license from the state of Alabama or Florida, Georgia, whatever the case may be, and so we're not going to give it to you. If we don't like, that went down the river as far as race goes, but that's why we have this whole gay marriage issue. The government has nothing to do with your marriage. It should have nothing to do with it. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and here's where I think you really win people over, because that sounds like a complete retreat from our principles, but it's not. It's not. Our principles are that government should be out of society in just about everywhere, except for very limited places that are listed in the enumerated powers. But this is the chaser to that argument, because it sounds like you're just keeling over to the progressives, but the chaser to that argument is this. So since the government has nothing to do with this, and since the Constitution does not say anything about marriage, what it means is if you have a congregation that wants to marry two people together or have a civil ceremony, fine. It doesn't hurt me. It's not hitting my nose. That swinging their fist is not hitting my nose. It doesn't affect me if two gay people get married. I may not like it, and I may think that it leads to the destruction of civilization, but that's a moral argument, not a political one. Now, what is interesting is that there is, in fact, a part of the Constitution that does talk about this issue, and it's the First Amendment. So that means that if you're a gay couple and you find a congregation that will marry you, and everybody in the congregation, including the pastor, obviously, is behind it, then knock yourselves out, have a good time, genuinely wish you the very best, I really do. However, if you are part of a congregation that considers this a sin, a biblical sin, it's very clear in the Bible, it's listed as a sin and so on, and that congregation chooses to not marry you, then you have to respect that congregation's right. They have a First Amendment right to say, we're not going to do it. And this is where the thing has gone too far in the other direction. The gay community is trying to enforce acceptance. They're trying to enforce tolerance and acceptance, and they have no right to do that. They have no right to tell me what to think. So while it's true that the government can't prevent people from gay people being married because the government's got nothing to do with it, the government does in fact have an obligation under the First Amendment to protect people's ability to think what they want to think and to act according to their conscience and according to their religious beliefs. And so the idea of the government forcing a church to marry two gay people when that particular church was against it is repulsive. It's exactly what we fear. So it's consistent. It's a consistent position. The government should be out of things like marriage, but the government is there to protect the innate, pre-existing right to free speech that is your natural law rights and came with you when you were born. There you go. So that. If you were to run on a program of limited government, if you were on a program of lower taxes because private companies do things better than the government, if it were my party, I would say no re-election. None. Term limits, yeah, 1 term. If you do a great 2 years as a representative, terrific. Go back home. Your information that you came to Washington with 2 years ago is obsolete now. A party that basically advertised itself as saying, look, nobody in this party gets reelected to the same office. If you're a representative and you want to become a senator, that's fine. If you're a senator, you want to become a governor, that's fine. If you're a governor, you want to become a president, that's fine. But no reelection to the same office, period. Because our theory of government, I would say, is that it's supposed to be government of the people and not a political class. The Democrats have people been in there 60 years. When Robert Byrd died, when he was brought into the Senate, there was no color TV. Forget the internet. I don't even know if there was electricity when Robert Byrd came to the Senate. So we will say no. We believe that there's enough people in America with good sense that we can find 535 of them every couple of years without any trouble whatsoever. And then think about what happens, because if you do that, if you run a party that basically says, no, we're not going to have re-election, then your candidates are immune to lobbying pressure, because most of that lobbying pressure is applied in terms of donations to allow you to win your re-election to your ongoing lifelong position. And you don't have to spend the second half of your term campaigning to have a third half of a term. You just have to do your work, and then you get to go home. And when you go home in glory. You did you came to Washington, you brought current problems from your neighborhood with you to Washington, did your best to solve them, and now you go back into the soup and somebody new comes out. If you had a party that did this, it would clean up the American people. If you were talking about things like, look, we need to audit the Federal Reserve. We have trillions of dollars in debt, and it's got to be paid back. And it took 60 years to get us there, so it's going to take 2 generations, maybe 3, to get us paid back. But we're doing a balanced budget and a surplus this year, even if it's a dollar surplus. And really, in terms of the budget, you can make the case, look, to the American people, if we freeze spending right now, if we don't make a single cut at all, nothing, we don't cut anything, but the 2016 budget is going to be the budget for the next 10 or 15 years. We're not going to have automatic increases. We're just going to stay where we are. Then the economy grows at such a rate that the what is now $20 trillion, presumably, if there's still a country and an economy 100 years from now, $20 trillion is going to feel like $20 billion. And so you just basically grow yourself out of it. But you have to stop increasing it. And these are simple things, and the American people get behind this in a real way, I think. A real way. Then, there you go. So, I think after this election is over, one way or another, there's definitely room to put together some pieces. And it pains me to watch the Republican Party fall apart, but it's not Donald Trump that's causing the Republican Party to fall apart. It's John Boehner and Mitch McConnell and all the rest of the people that we sent to Washington to do a job, and then just not only betrayed us, just ignored us, just pretended like it didn't happen. That's what's destroyed the Republican Party, is the fact that no conservatives have any faith in them because they're not a conservative party. So let's get one. Anyway, that's an interesting question, and I think there might be a lot of work to do in the future, and I did not think I'd be looking at the ruin of everything quite this fast, so I may have to stay on duty after all.